You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 2nd of December 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up on a busy programme today, fresh from the Royal Albert Hall, Monocle's fashion director Natalie Teodosi is here to bring us the highlights from last night's Fashion Awards. What was the headline, Natalie?
I think the headline, Tom, is that the British Fashion Council raised £1 million, doubling the number from last year to help all of London's young designers. So it was really exciting to be in the room and a lot of winners.
More from Natalie about those winners on the way in a moment. Plus, it's a parade of the talents here today. Monocle senior correspondent Fernando Augusto Pacheco is taking us to Latin America for a roundup of various politics stories. Faye, what have you got for us?
Hello, Tom. From an unpredictable Honduran political race to the upcoming Chilean election, we look at the state of the right in the continent.
Fernando will be back later in the programme. All that, and we'll be in Cannes for the latest from the international luxury travel market. That's what we have for you today, here on The Briefing with me, Tom Edwards. A very warm welcome to this Tuesday edition of the show. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We start, as promised, in London town, where the 2025 Fashion Awards took place last night at the Royal Albert Hall, a stone's throw from Monocle HQ. Natalie Teodosi, Monocle's fashion director, was there, and now she's here. Natalie, good afternoon.
I am here indeed. Good afternoon.
Tell me a little bit about the atmosphere on the ground and just remind us, I guess maybe some of our international listeners may not be familiar with the Fashion Awards. What does this event exist to do primarily?
So it's organised by the British Fashion Council. It's been going on for the last 10 years, but more recently they've opened it up, and instead of just looking at the London fashion industry and London fashion designers, it's meant to be a global gathering of the fashion industry. So it's a moment to get together at the end of the year to reflect on everyone's achievements, I think, and to recognise designers, both international and also up-and-coming British talent. But I think the main purpose, which sometimes people forget because they're there for the red carpet, is to raise money for the BFC Foundation, which supports students and young designers across the UK.
And you mentioned right at the top of the show, amazing numbers, £1 million, doubling last year's fundraise, which is really important. And this is a good story because often we talk about the failure in the UK to support creative industries broadly, but to just kind of undervalue fashion specifically as a sector in terms of soft power and just in sheer creative heft. And this is great because it's about supporting the next gen. So that's all very positive, I guess.
Exactly. And I think that has been happening in the UK, and it's an ongoing conversation, but there is a lot more effort to utilize fashion to support young talents, and the fact that there is a newly installed CEO, Laura Weir, at the British Fashion Council, it's given people a lot more optimism and new energy. And she's been there less than 6 months, and the fact that she has doubled the money that the awards raised this year is such a good sign and an indication of what's to come. 2026, she will unveil a full new strategy, so I think we will see London and the London fashion industry hopefully blossom after quite a few hard years.
And it's interesting with Laura Weir, of course, journalistic background, great stories emerging. So one perhaps shouldn't be surprised. Who else were the big winners and losers, Natalie, on the night? As you said, there was the red carpet, there's the awards as well. Any kind of standouts for you or things of note?
So it was a real mix. You had the heavyweights that are always important to recognize, from Jonathan Anderson to Sarah Burton, who has recently taken over Givenchy. One of my favorite designers who got the Vanguard Award was Dilara Fintikoglu, who is Turkish. And it brought me back a couple of years when I interviewed her just as she was graduating from Central St. Martin's. She hadn't made it to the graduate fashion show where they only handpick a few students. So she staged a guerrilla fashion show outside the main venue. She always had this rebellious energy, and she went on to build a brand that, I mean, it's still small, but it's starting to get real global recognition. A lot of interesting women wearing it. It's at couture level, and she went up on stage. She thanked herself. And all the misfits of London. So I thought that's kind of what London should be about and what we need more of. So it was great to see her get formally recognized, having had a few years of kind of pushing against the system and breaking a lot of rules.
I love that, Natalie. That's a great story. Now, listen, I think I wanted to ask you a little bit about what was kind of being discussed on the margins of these events. Often, the sort of the big trade rumours and stories. We shouldn't peddle the rumour mill here, but it is interesting to know what people are talking about. And obviously, we've had some confirmations this morning in terms of shifts of responsibility within some of the big groups, LVMH, for example, the sort of Prada and Versace story, maybe kind of nudging on. What were people talking about last night, and what's your take on some of those stories that have moved on this morning?
So for once, and I was really happy about that, there were no more rumors about which designer is moving where. I think that's done, and we're all happy about that. I was sitting, though, with some business reporters who had their eye on the moving stories, and we had confirmations first thing in the morning about the Versace and Prada acquisition being finalized, and also Pietro Beccari from the LVMH group. He is CEO of Louis Vuitton, but he's taking another very big position as CEO of the LVMH fashion group. So all of that was being discussed at the awards, and also just generally talking about retail, because Dover Street Market was another one of the companies being given special recognition awards. And I loved what they spoke about, again, being misfits, breaking every rule, being told that what you're doing is never going to work. And Adrian Joffe and his team spoke about, they said, well, it's still not quite making any sense. We have giant balls in the windows instead of product. Our footfall is not where it should be, but we still build a global business that's with 7 stores around the world. And so people were taking that as an example, and I think ready to rethink a bit the system and seeing that you can do things on your own terms and succeed.
Well, I was going to ask you a little bit about exactly that, and kind of throwing things forward through the prism of a couple of these other stories, some that we've talked about on this programme, of course, the future of the Armani group, this kind of quite complicated succession. Well, and it's interesting, and with Prada and Versace, the idea now is, okay, the acquisition is closed, but the next chapter starts now, and we look in 26. What does that actually look like? The processes, the machinations. Do we have a better understanding in either of those instances actually yet, Natalie, or just by instinct what you think those next tentative steps might look like?
I think actually that's one of the most exciting stories, and we'll see it play out in 2026. Apparently, the Prada Group has been trying to buy Versace since COVID. They didn't manage. There was a lot of failed attempts, and this year they managed to go back in with an offer, and today all the regulations have been approved, so it's official. And Prada has been quite a big guardian of Italian legacy brands, whether it is a pastry shop like Marchesi or a newsstand, and now Versace, which was in trouble. I think it wasn't under the right ownership, but it has so much potential. They have already placed one of their designers from Miu Miu to become its new creative director. And although that was the smallest show of the season that we've just seen, he probably got the biggest excitement. People didn't expect it, but they were so excited about how fresh his vision was, and a lot more day appropriate. So I think we might even be able to wear Versace on the streets. It's not just about crystal dresses anymore.
Stand clear and let me through. But that's interesting. So you think, in a way, actually, there might be a bit of an existing roadmap in terms of some big strategic and smaller tactical priorities in the short term. If it's been sort of germinating for almost now half a decade, really, there probably is more of a structured approach maybe already in place, and you've pointed to some of the evidence of that already, maybe.
Exactly. So there's a fresh design vision, but members of the Prada Group will join the board, and they have so much structure already from marketing to production that they can help restructure and revive that business.
And very briefly, I mentioned Armani. Do we know yet better about the direction of travel? Are there sort of dates in the diary we need to look for steers on how that's going to unfold, Natalie? It's a tricky question, but
I think there's still big question marks up in the air, but you can see that it's all starting to roll. There's now new members of the board, including Marco Bizzarri, who's a very talented CEO who had transformed Gucci, but also people coming from investment funds that don't only specialize in fashion, but food and hospitality. So there's good people in place to see the deal through. Who's going to be the conglomerate that wins the bid? We still don't know. And we will be looking at it very closely come next year. I just hope that the news doesn't break over Christmas because I want my holidays.
Please take note of Natalie's calendar, people. Natalie, great to get your insights. Thanks very much for joining us. And unpacking, so many fascinating stories. That's Monocle's fashion director, Natalie Teodosi. Right now, though, let's cross over to Studio 2. Standing by for us there with today's other news headlines is Hassan Anderson.
Thanks, Tom. Russian President Putin will meet US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in Moscow today in a bid to end the war in Ukraine. This comes after 2 days of negotiations in Florida between Ukrainian and US officials, with the White House saying it was very optimistic about reaching a peace deal. Meanwhile, Russian officials claim to have captured the key strategic towns of Pokrovsk and Vovchansk in the east of Ukraine. Early results in Honduras' presidential election show a virtual tie between conservative candidate Nasri Asfura and liberal Salvador Nasrallah, with both holding just under 40% of the vote. Around midday local time yesterday, polling showed that Asfura held a narrow lead of just 515 votes. The head of the Electoral Commission called for patience and prudence while the result was tallied. And China says it expelled a Japanese fishing vessel from what it considers Chinese waters around the Diaoyu Islands, while Japan says it pushed back 2 Chinese Coast Guard ships that approached the boat near the Senkaku Islands. The exchange comes amid heightened tensions after Japan's Prime Minister warned that any Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger a military response from Tokyo. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed. Has more headlines coming your way at the top of the next hour. 1300 here in London, 1400 if you're on CET. Joining me here in Studio 1 now, though, is Fernando Augusto Pacheco, Monocle Senior Correspondent. Got there in the end, Faye. How are you today?
I'm very good. I have lots of great stories from Latin America for you.
Well, this is it. You're going to rattle us through all sorts of stories from across the continent, and it is a bit of a kind of a review of where the far right stands. It's interesting, though, Has just mentioned in the headlines there, Honduras. Perhaps we should jump in there, Faye, because, okay, it's a small country in global terms, but super important, it's strategically important, and it's a pretty compelling, I mean, the numbers, as Has was describing the news headlines, pretty interesting.
It's truly nail-biting. I mean, the difference of votes is 515 nationwide. So currently, I believe the vote has stopped. I mean, it's live. They're counting. I think they had some kind of technical difficulties, but I think so far nothing has been proven. It's not fraud, as Donald Trump already is saying. Of course.
Constructive, helpful. Thanks for that.
But let's look at the candidates. The one that is ahead, he's a right-wing candidate, former mayor of Tegucigalpa, is Nasri Asfura. And I was reading around, apparently he does have Palestinian heritage. I mean, this has nothing to do, but this is just a kind of a curiosity here. And Trump, he's throwing all his efforts to support him. In second place, we have the centrist candidate Salvador Nasrallah. But this could literally go anywhere. We're talking here about a difference of 500 votes. So let's see if later in the day we might have a decision. Hopefully there'll be no complications, no protests in the streets. And we need to look at this as well a little bit, in my view. The current president, Xiomara Castro, I think she's been, fairly successful. I think Honduras is a very violent country. The rates did go down, but it's still very high. So I think, as always, that's been one of the main topics, in this election. And I wonder why perhaps Nasri is ahead on this.
Faye, not to kind of, strike an alarmist tone, but you've got a country, as you said, so homicide rates are down. They're still very high, I think amongst the highest in the world, even given that improvement. You've got a country then with a real knife-edge vote, already claim and counterclaim of impropriety, plus Trump weighing in from without, it feels like it has all the ingredients for a disputed outcome either way and just general extension of tensions. Not wishing that, but that must be somewhat alarming at this stage, no?
It is alarming. And I think whoever wins, it's a defeat for the left, because Xiomara sees from the left and her candidate didn't even go, to the, it's not even in the top 2 candidates. So we'll wait and see, but I'm very curious about that one, Tom.
Well, we'll come back to this idea of the crisis for the centre-left, a refrain that we've covered. Well, not just across Latam, but wherever we look in the world.
Exactly.
We'll come back to that in a minute. Next stop, though, Chile. How does this fit into that same picture?
Very different countries. They've been having a lot of problem with crime as well, Tom. The crime did go up by quite a large percentage, but even with that increase, I think it's still one of the safest countries in the region. We're talking about very different countries here, Honduras to Chile. So on the 14th of December, with the second round of their presidential elections, and the candidates couldn't be more different. The dispute is going to be between Janete Cara, she's from the Communist Party, and José Antonio Cast, a far-right politician, a supporter of Pinochet. And that's remarkable because Chile really moved along from Pinochet's shadow after, they really kind of, I don't know, I mean, they put people on trial, unlike my own country, Brazil, for example, after the dictatorship. So it'll be quite a big deal if he wins. And he's been trying for a few elections now, but let's be honest, looking at the numbers, even though Janete Cara won on the first round, I mean, it's unlikely that she will win the second round. And the reason for it, because the third and fourth places, there are more candidates to the right, sometimes even to the right of José Antonio Cast.
And that takes some doing, as I understand it.
Absolutely. And as I said, crime has been a big issue. They had a lot of migration from other countries, especially Venezuela, so they are having to deal with that as well. So it's going to be almost a miracle for Janete to win this one.
In fact, what I find interesting, we're talking about Honduras and, potentially Asfura succeeding Castro. The current incumbent in Chile, I don't know, given the story of Boric, you wouldn't necessarily have guessed that you would have these two protagonists making it to the final round, would you? It's kind of interesting to look at that context.
I think Boric was one of those candidates that is more popular perhaps outside Chile, So there's been a lot of criticism towards him. And I have to mention here, in Chile you can only have one term, so he couldn't go for re-election. But you're right. I mean, he's of course supporting Janete Cara and is not necessarily, she's not necessarily going to win this one.
We have a couple more to talk about before we zoom out.
We're doing the whole continent almost.
2026. Well, we're talking about 2026 in fashion. Let's look at 2026 in LatAm politics. I'll ask you about your motherland in a second, Brazil. But let's start in Peru, Faye. What do we need to know looking ahead? Well,
first of all, Peru has been an incredibly unstable country in the last decade. I believe they had 8 leaders, many corruption cases, left, right. So, of course...
This is like UK-esque numbers, right?
Exactly. Well, yeah, to be honest, it's not even that shocking, I was counting, I was like, well, yeah, actually, the UK is probably the same. But, as I said, I think they have a leading candidate for the presidential election next year, someone that is very close to the MAGA movement. And let's not laugh here, Tom, but his nickname is Porky because he does apparently resemble the cartoon character Porky Pig, but he's proud of that. I mean,
I've done some picture research.
It's true, right?
And he's really leaning into it, as I believe they say in modern parlance, either holding up like little kind of gonks of Porky Pig, or actually an actual piglet. I've seen him. He's owning it, I believe they say.
People like that. People really like that.
What's he like, though, Rafael?
He's, as I said, very close to the MAGA movement, and he's been, mayor of Lima as well, which is a massive city in Latin America. And I was reading a few reports. I'm not saying he's been the perfect mayor, but apparently there's been, especially when it comes to infrastructure, some improvements on the city. So I think he does have something to show. But again, if he wins, Peru is going to be much closer to the United States as well.
The spectre of Trump seems to be hovering in the background of all of these. And to that exact point, what about Brazil? What about the motherland, Faye? We discussed Bolsonaro, I think, last week with this sort of botched attempt to remove his ankle bracelet and all the rest of it. We discussed previously the chances of a sort of weird dynastic Bolsonaro movement. That is looking increasingly unlikely. But where are we at, and what is driving the narratives for 2026 back home?
good news for moderates in Brazil. You know, of course, Lula is going to try for his fourth term. He is the favorite, but I wouldn't say a total favorite. I think the right's still very powerful, but I don't see a chance whatsoever for any of Bolsonaro's sons or his wife, Michele Bolsonaro, because, you know, he's in jail. It's going to be extremely difficult. Having said that, the right candidates, there are a few at the moment, they need the support of these Bolsonaristas, you know. So no one is criticizing Bolsonaro. And we have to talk about the leading one, which is Tarcísio Freitas. He's the current governor of São Paulo. And for those who don't know Brazilian politics, to be governor of São Paulo is the second most powerful position in the country. He is right-wing. I mean, he's a former army camp captain, but he's a bit of more of a shapeshifter character. You know, he can be moderate. He's very much pro-business. So our business community loves him. Wall Street loves him as well. But he's still defending Bolsonaro. So there is this fear if someone like Tarcísio wins. Of course, he's not much to the right as Bolsonaro, but he might pardon, the former president. So there's a lot of discussions about that. But I think he's the name to watch for next year.
Well, just briefly, is this someone who can legitimately challenge Lula, do you think? I mean, I know it's an unhelpful hypothetical, but let's say it pans out that the two of them are, you know, they go head to head. Does he have the mix? The shape-shifting is helpful, maybe, but does he have the popular appeal more broadly without the state of Sao Paulo?
That's the thing, because when I see him talking in speeches, and he doesn't seem very charismatic to me. But then I've been wrong in the past, Tom, because I've seen Bolsonaro speak and I was like, okay, I didn't feel like the most charismatic president as well. But, you know, people are saying that, you know, it will be very competitive. Lula is the favorite, but we're talking here about 4 or 5 points in the poll, so it's not that far.
That's one gaff's worth of lead that can disappear in an instant.
At least it's not 500 votes difference between them.
Well, exactly. We'll watch all those stories. Fernando, fascinating roundup. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us here on The Briefing on Monocle Radio. It is 22 minutes past 1300 hours in Cannes, and it is to there that we fly now to hear from Monocle's own Laura Kramer. Our senior producer is stationed at the International Luxury Travel Market in Cannes right now. Good afternoon, Laura. How the devil are you?
Bonjour, Tom. How are you? It's really
like that.
quiet here right now because if you're wondering why it is so deathly quiet, people are taking their lunch breaks. So a good time to check in with you for the briefing.
Yeah, okay. Now you're on a subject that I'm really passionate about, lunch, Laura. But let's park that for a moment. Just remind us, look, Monocle has sent quite the vanguard kind of down to Cannes for ILTM the last couple of years. I know our own Tyler Brûlé is there. And indeed, Laura, let's kick off with this. He was hosting a panel last night, or speaking on a panel, I believe. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, so Tyler moderated a panel last night on the opening night of the event at the Palais de Festival, so in front of about 3,000 people. He was joined on stage by Anna Nash, she's the president of Explora Journeys, alongside Steve Adele, senior VP of Oceania and Region 7 Seas Cruising, and the CEO of Clinique La Prairie, the world-renowned Swiss longevity clinic. So a very fun mix of people. Obviously, they chatted about the state of cruising and whether high net worth travelers are leaning into it more. Sea travel has become a kind of all-in-one experience, and also longevity, which is a fun mix into that, about how it's having sort of a real moment. And because of that demand, the idea that's of the spa and wellness has really evolved, and hospitality brands are weaving it more into their DNA. And of course, because it is proper Monocle style, the night ended with cocktails at the Carlton and then a nightcap at the Martinez bar. So business with pleasure, as always, Tom.
I'm sure the picture of responsibility, you got an early night, of course, and kept yourself fresh, Laura, I imagine. Now, listen, that was the scene last night, kicking the proceedings off. What about the scene around our little setup, our stand there where you are right now? Use your words, Laura, and paint a picture for us. And what would we see if we were standing where you're standing right now?
It is a very slick operation. I did just see a plant fall on a lady, though, and she's okay. The only problem was she was wearing a white shirt, so she had to kind of like brush that off and run to the restroom. She is all right, though, I should say. But we are based at the Cannex Bar. It's broadcasting from this kind of glass-fronted radio studio that does make me slightly feel like we are in a fishbowl, but it is fun because people wander past, they peek in, they watch the interviews, and alongside that, we have a very handsome shop with the latest issues of Monocle, Confect, and all our books, fragrances, and stationery as well. And we are in good company, I should say, because Bista Collection is right next door, as our design hotels. I can see them. We'll be chatting with their VP later today. Plus, we are also hosting drinks here later. So at 5:30, this spot will be clinking with champagne flutes as we toast another excellent ILTM. Yes.
That sounds great, Laura. And just in terms of who's going to come to chat with us, I know, as you said, it's the beautiful thing about these fairs is people literally wander by, don't they? Stick a head around the door, and before you know it, you're chatting on Monocle Radio. But we've got lots of exciting guests we're going to speak to. Just tell us a little bit about what's on the agenda in terms of who some of those names are, some of the brands, but also what kind of topics you're going to be tackling this week.
Absolutely. So we've already kicked things off with some big heavy hitters, the CEO of Barcelona Tourism, the CEO of the Mandarin Oriental Group, just to name a few. And there's plenty more still ahead, as you alluded to. We will be speaking with more CEOs of the Corinthia and the Peninsula hotels. We'll be hearing from Brand USA. And I think it's especially timely with 2026 and the World Cup on the horizon. Lots to chat about with them. And we'll also be sitting down with founders of some very smart boutique destinations as well. Our Emma Nelson will also be heading here later today. She'll be joining us in a few hours. And yeah, full slate, a very sharp crowd, I should say. And it's, exactly the type of thing that makes ILTM worth the trip.
Absolutely, Laura. Look, we really look forward to hearing from the team throughout the next couple of days. Do keep an eye and an ear across Monocle Radio and monocle.com to read and hear more about it. Laura, I'll let you get back to your champagne flutes. Sorry, I mean your busy radio station. We'll hear from you, I'm sure, later. That's our Laura Kramer, senior producer in Cannes at ILTM. And that, my friends, brings us breathlessly to the end of today's Tuesday edition of The Briefing. What a programme. It was produced by Anita Riotta. Our researcher was Joanna Moser and our studio manager was Lily Austin. My thanks to them, one and all. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow, the midweek edition coming to you at noon London time with Chris Chermack in the chair, I believe. But from me, Tom Edwards, and the Tuesday team, that's all. Goodbye. Thanks for listening.